They gave you paradise. A world without hunger, without disease. The Luminians arrived in their silent, perfect ships. They offered humanity a place among the stars. They were beings of pure logic. Their kindness was a perfect calculation. They gave you cities that touched the clouds, parks that bloomed in every season. They gave you the Etherium, a limitless energy source. It powered everything. It hummed beneath your feet, a constant, gentle reminder of their gift. But a gift can also be a cage, a beautiful gilded cage with invisible bars. You lived with longer lives. You had more knowledge than ever before. Yet, you felt a strange emptiness. Something was missing from this perfect world. This power they gave you felt like a leash. It responded to cold, precise commands. It was logical. It was efficient. It was completely without passion. It was Luminians. And you were human. You started noticing things. Small things at first. A Luminian's observer standing motionless for hours. Its glowing eyes were not looking at your cities. They were fixed on the empty void between galaxies. You saw a tremor in its usually steady hand. They never spoke of fear. The word did not seem to exist in their language. But you could see it in their actions. Their fleets ran constant, silent patrols. They scanned nothingness with a desperate intensity. These perfect beings were afraid of something. You began to listen. You used your access to the Ethereum network. Not for power, but for information. Late at night, you would sift through their communications. Most of it was star science and logistical data. Then you found it. Whispers in the dark. Fragments of conversations, mentions of a creeping, silent end. A void that did not attack. It simply arrived. A creeping stillness that extinguished stars. The Luminians' logic had met its match, and it was terrified. The Ethereum was a tool for the Luminians, a means to an end. For you, it was something more. You felt its flow inside your mind. It was a river of potential. You learned to touch it differently, not with logic, but with feeling. One day you stood before a raw energy conduit. You closed your eyes and remembered a moment of pure joy, the laughter of a child, the warmth of the sun on your face. You pushed that feeling into the Ethereum. The energy did not just flow, it danced. It bloomed into a cascade of light. A Luminian's observer saw your creation. It watched the swirling, chaotic light with an unnerving stillness. Its voice was flat, devoid of any wonder. Your method is flawed. Emotion creates unpredictable results. It is a variable that must be controlled. They saw your gift as a flaw, a bug in the system, but you saw its truth. This was humanity's true strength. Not our minds, but our hearts. You had found a key. You just needed to find the right lock. Then the news arrived, not through official channels, but through the same dark whispers you monitored. The Luminians' world of Xylos had gone silent. It was a jewel in their logical empire, a planet of perfect order and serene thought. There was no distress call, no sign of a struggle, no wreckage of defeated ships. One moment, Xylos was a beacon of Luminian's logic. The next, it was just gone. The Ethereum network on that world simply ceased to exist. The Luminians were shaken to their core. Their models provided no answers. Their flawless star science had no explanation. How could a world fall without a fight? How could order be defeated by nothing? For them, it was an equation with no solution. For you, it was a confirmation. The silent end was real. The whispers from the void were true. Perfection was fragile. And a crack had just appeared. The Luminians' response was to calculate. They ran trillions of simulations. They debated probabilities in hushed, logical tones. They were paralyzed by the unknown. Their greatest strength, their logic, had become their prison. But humanity did not freeze. You and others saw an opportunity. While they debated, you created. You gathered a small group of like-minded people. Artists, poets, musicians. People the Luminians saw as beautifully inefficient. You taught them your secret. You showed them how to pour their feelings into the ethereum. An artist shaped energy with her sorrow. She created a weeping nebula of impossible colors. A musician used his rage. He forged a crackling spear of sound and light. Our creations were messy. They were chaotic and beautiful. They were born of the very thing the Luminians feared. They were illogical. They were alive. We were building impossible things with their energy. Your secret workshops did not stay secret for long. Luminians' drones began to appear. They hovered silently, recording everything. At first, you expected them to shut you down, to correct your flawed methods. But they only watched. Their observation became more frequent, more intense. They sent their senior analysts, beings who had not set foot on human worlds for decades. They watched your beautiful chaos with a new urgency. You realized they were no longer just watching. They were studying. The fear you had seen in them was now mixed with something else, a desperate glimmer of hope. They had seen the enemy. They had seen their own methods fail. They saw our chaos as a potential weapon. They looked at a sculpture of pure joy, and for the first time, they saw its tactical value. The Watchers were now being watched. Humanity was no longer a pet project. You were their last, best hope. The Elder Ones, the highest council of the Luminians, finally revealed the truth. They summoned you to their primary vessel, a ship so vast it blotted out the stars. Inside there was no grandeur, only the cold hum of failing logic. They named the enemy. It was not a race or an empire. It was a concept, a force of cosmic entropy they called the Silence. It did not conquer. It erased. It was a wave of pure negation that consumed thought. It consumed order. The Silence was drawn to complex, ordered systems. The more logical and predictable a civilization, the faster it fell. It was an enemy of order itself. The Luminian civilization was a grand shining beacon, and the Silence had come to turn out the light. They showed you their battle data. It was a grim tapestry of defeat. The Luminians' fleet was a marvel of engineering. Their strategies were masterpieces of tactical logic. They met the Silence in the void. And they were losing. Badly. Their ships would approach the edge of the Silence. They would fire their perfect weapons in perfect formations. The Silence did not retaliate. It did not defend itself. It simply absorbed the energy. It absorbed the thought behind the attack. Then it would advance. The Luminian ships would fall silent. Their crews, their logical, ordered minds, would be erased. Their retreat was calculated. It was efficient. It was also perfectly predictable. And it was failing. Every logical move they made only fed their enemy. This was a war logic could not win. The Luminians had built an empire on certainty. Now they faced an enemy that thrived on it. The more they fought as themselves, the faster they would die. The Elder Ones stood before you, 3 beings of light and metal. They had always seemed like gods. Their presence was immense. Their wisdom was legendary. Now they looked small. Their light seemed to flicker with uncertainty. One of them, the lead entity, stepped forward. Its voice was different now. The perfect melodic cadence was gone. It was strained. It was the sound of a being at its absolute limit. It spoke your name. You are the unforeseen variable, it said. Your people wield our gift in ways we cannot comprehend. Your creations are illogical. They are chaotic. They are everything the silence should consume. It paused. And yet, it does not. They came to you not as gods. They were not benefactors bestowing another gift. They were supplicants. They were beggars at the door of chaos. They asked for a miracle. They asked you to save them from their own perfection. You gathered the best human minds, not just the scientists and engineers, but the poets, the dreamers, the mad inventors, the ones who looked at the Ethereum and saw a canvas. You stood before the Luminians' High Council. You laid out your plan. It had no fleet formations. It had no weapon yields. It was a proposal to fight a void with a song. A plan to broadcast the total, unfiltered chaos of the human spirit, straight into the heart of the silence. You proposed linking every human mind across all of our worlds. We would pour everything we were into the Ethereum. Our joy, our rage, our sorrow, our hope, our capacity for irrational love, our stupid, stubborn courage. We would create a wave of pure, unstructured existence. The Luminians were appalled. Their luminous forms dimmed with shock. One of them called it collective madness. You proposed to weaponize insanity, it said. The feedback could shatter every mind in the network. It is an act of self-destruction. You simply nodded. Yes, it is illogical. It is dangerous. It is probably a terrible idea. You smiled. That's the whole point. You tried perfection. Now, let us try being human. They had no other options. Their logic had led them to a dead end. Reluctantly, desperately, they agreed. They gave you access to their entire Ethereum network. The power of 1,000 stars was at your command. The great work began. Forging a symphony of chaos was not easy. It was the most complex undertaking in human history. You had to link billions of minds, each one a universe of thought and feeling, each one unique, each one beautifully flawed. Engineers worked alongside artists. They built psychic conduits that looked like sculptures. They wrote code that flowed like poetry. They had to create a network that could contain a hurricane of emotion, without breaking, mostly. There were a few small, emotionally charged explosions. Thankfully, nobody was hurt. You became a conductor, a shepherd of souls. You traveled from world to world. You spoke to crowded auditoriums. You spoke to small, hidden communities. You convinced them to join this mad chorus, to offer their deepest feelings to the void. Some were afraid, many were excited. But all of them understood. This was the moment humanity would define itself. Not as the children of the Luminians, but as a force of nature in our own right. We would weaponize our very spirit. The day arrived. A hush fell over the human worlds. The network was complete. Every city, every outpost, every single soul was connected, awaiting your command. The Ethereum, once a quiet hum, now thrummed with potential. It felt like a string on a cosmic instrument, pulled taut. You stood on the bridge of the Luminians' flagship. The Elder Ones watched you. Their faces were impossible to read. Were they witnessing their salvation, or their final foolish mistake? The great, silent expanse of the enemy loomed on the main view screen, a patch of darkness where stars should be. This was the precipice of everything. The power the Luminians had given you, the gilded leash, was finally, truly yours. You felt the minds of your entire species, all of them waiting, all of them trusting you. For a moment, you felt the weight of it all. Then you felt a surge of pride, a defiant, illogical joy. We stood ready. We were a species that had reached for the stars in fragile metal cans, a species that wrote poetry about the darkness. We were about to shout into the abyss, and we were going to make sure it heard us. You looked at the void. Then you looked at the hopeful faces of your crew. You took a deep breath. You opened the channel to every human in the galaxy. Your voice was calm. It was clear. Let's make some noise. You gave the command to begin. The first note of the song was not a sound. It was a feeling. It was your own defiant hope, pushed into the ethereum with all your strength. It was the spark that lit the fire. Then, they joined you. Billions of voices. Billions of souls singing their truth. A tidal wave of pure emotion surged through the network. It was not a single, coherent melody. It was a symphony of chaos, the joyful noise of a festival, the quiet grief of a funeral, the burning rage of injustice, the fierce love of a parent. The ethereum, designed for clean, logical power, screamed. It sang a song of the human soul. Light of every color erupted from the network. It pulsed in time with 1 billion different heartbeats. It was the most beautiful, terrifying thing you had ever seen. The wave hit the silence. It was a tide of pure, unrefined potential, a tsunami of life crashing against a shore of nothingness. The silence was a void. It consumed order, logic, and information. But this was none of those things. How does a void consume a feeling? How does negation process joy? The wave of impossibility washed over the silence. It was a force the void could not comprehend. It was like trying to catch water in a net. It was like trying to reason with a hurricane. The silence did not break. It did not shatter. It flinched. The absolute darkness recoiled. The edge of the void fizzled and popped, like static on a broken channel. The song of humanity was not a weapon it could absorb. It was a poison of pure existence. It was a concept so alien to the void that it could not coexist. We did not destroy their enemy for them. That was never the point. The silence was not gone. It was hurt. It was confused. It had retreated into the deep void to lick its wounds. It would be back. But the war was not over. It had just truly begun. The Luminians watched as the wave of chaos pushed back the darkness. Their perfect sensors struggled to report what was happening. Their logical minds reeled. They had witnessed an impossibility. They had seen a miracle born of madness. You turned to the Elder Ones. Their light was brighter now, not with cold logic, but with a new, flickering warmth. You had not just given them a victory. You had given them a new weapon, a new path forward, the path of feeling. We gave them back their freedom, the freedom to be unpredictable, the freedom to be irrational, the freedom to feel hope. We broke their gilded cage, and in doing so, we broke our own. The ethereum no longer hummed with control. It sang with the infinite, beautiful chaos of life. We had returned their gift, with interest,